All right, we are live with To Be Determined, and as always, I'm here with Logical Lion and our guest, Maddie the News Chick.
Hello.
Hello. Omegon is running late due to family stuff. Go ahead, Logical. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just gonna ask our guest to give kind of a brief hi. This is who I am. Kind of a, the spiel.
Spiel.
You mean okay?
Yeah, that's you. You're the guest.
Formerly Mad Woman Muses. I shortened it to MWM Media because that was just too long of a name. Everybody knows me as Maddie online or the News Chick on Twitter. I do a little bit of news, a little bit of entertainment, and a little bit of book club, and a little bit of whatever my ADD tells me to.
Gotcha. And for those watching at home, I apologize for the black screen. I am working diligently to fix that. So stand by. While I'm fixing that, I will kind of go on a little diatribe here. Tonight's episode is the anatomy of terrorism, because there has been some debate of late on whether or not, on whether or not Antifa is actually could be considered a terrorist group. And what I'd like to do this evening is kind of go back in time and examine terrorism in and of itself as a mechanism for political change, as a mechanism for demoralizing an enemy in war, and then how that equates to what we see in our modern era. What do you think about that, Thorne?
I love history. Let's do it.
All right. Now, first things first, let me get this chat up real quick. Yeah, here we go. That's what I wanted. There we go. Okay. Bear with me again. OBS has got a pretty sizable learning curve, and I'm still working at the kinks, but I think I got it. All right, here we go. Yay.
It really, really does. A little bit more. Okay.
Yeah, and as we're talking, I'll get the chat up as well so we can stay on. How's that look? Everything looking copacetic?
Yeah, I mean, I can see the chat, but...
Right on. Okay, so we're going to switch from the chat to...
hide group chat.
Boink. There we go. Okay. Terrorism. The word terrorism originated from the quote-unquote Reign of Terror. Well, I mean, it's called the Reign of Terror. During the French Revolution in 1794. There was an 11-month period where the French government, I believe is right before the actual French Rebellion, where they basically went on a slaughtering spree and were just chopping off dissenters and protesters, and they were just lopping everyone's heads off with guillotines. And it came to be known as the Reign of Terror period, or in France, some word that sounds like terrorism. Yeah, exactly. So as time went on, we the rest of the world adopted the word to describe those kind of actions. My first question is it terrorism if it's a government committing the atrocities against their own people, or is it simple oppression, insofar as oppression can be simple? And I'll throw that out to our guest first, and then Thorne, if you want to opine as well.
Well, I mean, for political gain, that's how we usually, violence or something for political gain is how we loosely define terrorism and how we argue about it online. But when it's from a government, it's more authoritarian in nature, and I could say it would be more oppressive in the sense that they want you to think a certain way, and they figure if they do it by using these means and people aren't paying attention, then they will be able to reach their ultimate goal by having you, listen and not question to what's being said.
Correct. Yeah. So then, it is a little bit more like authoritarianism. It is an interesting question, though. Is it terrorism when the government is forcing their own people through terror through violence to political change? And I would have to say that it's more of a form of authoritarianism than terrorism, because the people already were in power and they have that leverage to force their opinion on the people under them.
As a follow-up, it completely does. Is political gain, in air quotes, is a pretty nebulous term to me. I feel that if a government is killing off its own people, at least the ones who are opposing the government, would that not be political gain?
It would be in a sense that if we take a look at, let me see, something that's happening now or has been happening recently, like in the past 50 years. If we go back and we look at what happened in Cuba in Batista and when Fidel Castro overthrew, the people that spoke against both of them were put in political prisons, silenced, and now that Castro, his brother's in power, his brother is following along the lines of Fidel, in that anybody that speaks against them is never heard of. They're put in something that Cuba calls las cabañas, which is an underground mountain prison. You're never seen or heard from again, or they just shoot you.
Yeah, they disappear you.
As a traitor, in order to continue to hold that power. So it would be political gain for them because they are seeing it as, to this day, Raul still calls it the revolution. They've never stepped out of that.
I apologize for that. I had a little bit of a distraction.
No problem.
Cuba the baby wanted the blanket. Go ahead, Thorne.
Well, I was saying I lived in Miami for a good long while. So in that time there, I spoke to a lot of Cubans, and they are definitely riding off of the high of the revolution and just basically trying to keep that alive in Cuba's case.
Well,
and they're just soaked in propaganda.
Well, in states, because Cuba is a socialist or communist regime, violence is necessary to maintain control. And I think that we can see that kind of across the board, both from monarchies, historically speaking, all the way up through, say, Mao Zedong's, communist revolution in the earlier 20th century. In order to maintain control, violence is required in these communal type governance systems. But again, I see I'm stuck in the middle here because I go back and forth on the idea that it's almost like saying white people can't be racist. A government can't be a terrorist organization by virtue of its control, but then on the other hand, because of the political thing. Maybe if we go further back, I want to go all the way back to what I consider the first actual terrorists, and that would be the Sicarii Zealots. For those that don't know, the Sicarii Zealots were Jewish rebels, I suppose would probably be the best way of describing them. They were rebelling against Roman rule in the Jewish homeland back in 60, what's it say? I think it's 68, 60, there you go, 66 to 70. It was the first Roman Hebrew or Roman Jewish war, and it was caused by the Sicarii. So basically what had happened was Romans expanded out as the first civilization. Well, I use that term very loosely. The first imperial, I'm trying to be accurate while at the same time concise. Rome to me was the first actual civilized of the people empire that grew of its own volition versus one guy going, I must conquer all these lands. Does that make sense? I mean, it's a terrible description, but do you understand where I'm going with this? It was a government versus a guy controlling a bunch of people. Like
Rome was the first empire that kind of had a more natural growth rather than a conquering type. Okay.
Yes, thank you. It was organic by virtue of the governance system that the Romans put in place. But anyway, I digress a little bit.
I can accept that.
Thank you. It wasn't the first civilization, but they were really the first empirical colonizing empire, in my humble opinion. With the Sicaries, because of that, they imposed taxes. Well, the Jews didn't want to pay the taxes, and if they didn't pay the taxes, they were punished. And so what they did is they went underground and started resorting to assassination and actual terroristic type tactics against Roman citizenry, not just the soldiers. They would kill Roman citizens as well. The end result was the Roman-Jewish war that ultimately saw the Sicarii wiped out. Now, my question on the Sicarii is, was it inevitable that the invention of a nation state, such that Rome really kind of brought to the fore in terms of human evolution from a civilization standpoint, was it inevitable that a nation state like Rome would lead to terrorism? Because the quote-unquote oppressed minorities wouldn't really have much of a say in their own governance of this nation state. Whereas, say like a Genghis Khan, his nephew could get a bunch of guys together and challenge him for control. Not so with a nation state. Does that make sense? I mean, I feel like maybe I'm bastardizing the question. Is it inevitable? Is terrorism inevitable in a nation-state civilization? Is really the bottom line of my question.
Go ahead, Maddie.
That is an interesting question, and I think it would depend on the nation state and how they particularly run it. Because to me, terrorism and rebellion and coups spring from a feeling of the people not only being disgruntled but actively wanting to do something against their state or government that they are living under. If they're under some sort of authoritarian heel, some sort of dictatorship that they can't abide to live in any longer, then you will probably wind up having terrorist cells or people coming together to rebel to the point of having a coup d'etat.
Yes, but if I could counter, even in a arguably the freest society in the history of human civilization, i.e. America, we have Antifa, we have the KKK, we have the Branch Davidians. I mean, we have homegrown terrorism, despite the fact that you can voice your opposition freely, peacefully. We're protected in that. And we still have people using violence as a means of political aims.
Because in the case of some... Sorry.
That's okay. My counter question to you would be, why do you consider the KKK a terrorist group? They are white supremacists. Sorry. They don't really fight against the country. Their rallies have been peaceful up until Charlottesville, when they had to face off with Antifa. They have been on a watch list, and for over the past, I would say 15, 20 years, I will wager the guess, they have been mainly quiet until the push from the regressive left, for lack of a better term, of that particular movement.
Yeah, I'm not referring to third wave KKK. I only talk about second or first wave. Third wave KKK is so inconsequential. They're like, less than 1% of they're like 0.01% of the population. I could care less. Yeah. There's more transgenders than KKKs at this point.
Yeah,
but yeah, I'm talking about second wave, the hangings, the cross burnings, etc.
Yeah, the lynchings and the cross burnings and the destruction of property, burning of buildings. They would definitely, in the first and second wave, were definitely a terrorist organization.
Yeah, well, political gain is not always specifically about government or governance. In the case of the KKK, the goal, the political aim in first and second wave was get the darkies out of my neighborhood. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was their motto. That's what they were all about, is segregation, scare the black people away. And that's terrorism, bottom line, terrorism.
And here's the thing with the KKK, rolling back to, is it terrorism when the government does it? The KKK had a lot of ties to local governments mainly, but also to like the higher up senators and congressmen. They actually had political power.
Now, that's a great point to bring up, Thorne, because I wanted to ask this question, well, I don't know, a while back, but never did. Is the fact that there are Klansmen who are senators, congressmen, etc., is that a case of correlation or causation? Meaning, here I'm a senator, I benefit if there's strife and I can come in as a hero figure and be like, hey, my majority people, I hate them black people too. Even though I don't really feel that way, it politically is expedient for me to play the role. Do you think that because of the numbers of first and second wave KKK, that the people, it's like the Nazis, the folks that didn't actually believe it but went along to benefit from it, like Oskar Schindler, for example, do you think that that is the case when it comes to senators, or do you think that they legitimately were, proud, cross-burning, grand wizards? What do you think?
Well, looking at the history up until today, they have become less of the, wake up in the middle of the night if you're not white, Anglo-Saxon, and Protestant, to a, cross being burned in your yard and having them scream at you to leave the neighborhood, and more of, we need to stay within our race. We don't need to crossbreed. We don't need to deal with any of these people that are not like us. And, try and keep it, on the down low as much as possible. And if we have people that are senators, maybe we can whisper in their ear to see if we can affect certain laws certain ways without getting in trouble if we have people on the inside. I can see why they would want senators and congressmen as a whole in there, because, you know, if their vote happens to be a swaying vote, then they can actually stop some legislation that, you know, these particular white nationalists and white supremacist groups don't want passed. I mean, I believe to this day that if they would have had more influence, affirmative action would have never been passed.
Also, Broken Heart Liberal has said that they're according to the FBI, they do still infiltrate like local law enforcement and local governments. Like they still have pull in some areas.
Does?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Wow. I'd want to look more into that and get some sources for that information, just to verify it, because it seems a little dubious given the political climate.
I mean, also, like, local government could be a town of 500 people.
Of course, yeah, exactly. I was in a tiny little town, and everybody knew everybody as well. So my follow-up to that is, again, like I said, is terrorism inevitable within a nation state? Good answer. Is terrorism inevitable whenever cultures rub up against each other? Forget a nation state. Let's just say cultures in general.
That is a really good. I could probably see that. I mean, we're seeing a lot of that through the Islamic faith, or the radical Islamic faith, to make a distinction. Because you do have every religious group, every religious ideology, there's two sides to every coin. There's the people that quietly, respectively follow their faith and their ideology. They don't ruffle feathers. They don't put it in your face. And then there's the more radical side to it, which is, you know, your radical Islamists, which is your Westboro Baptist churches, which is, you know, that kind of stuff is what I mean by one or the other. And it can cause terroristic things like ISIS to spring up, like Al-Qaeda, the Coptic Christians in, I believe, Africa or the Middle East that are more radical than normal Christians because of their nation states and because of what they're fighting against. But that is an ideological war, and I don't know if the ideological war would fall within the confines of terrorism, even though we certainly see it as terrorism.
What say you, Thorne?
I think that when groups that are significantly different from each other come together, that there's going to be some friction. And I don't know that friction, that violence against each other, or even just general animosity could be, obviously not the general animosity, but I don't know that could immediately be labeled as terrorism either.
So, okay.
Hello,
interesting. Yeah. I'm glad I got the chat in the window for those that just noticed. Oh, and Finer Print, I'm glad that you joined us.
Yo.
Yeah, it's interesting because when we listen to the garbage coming from the leftist SJW crazy movement going on right now, the words are violence, words are terrorism, etc. Is there a distinction to be made between the threat of violence and actual violence? Because I only consider violence when I consider terrorism. I don't think that name calling or whatever is actual any kind of terrorism. But the threat of violence, i.e. convert or die, whether or not I'm actually going to shoot you if I'm saying convert or die, would that be in the same vein? Is that in and of itself also terrorism? And I'm just looking for definitional so I can kind of feed this into the next point.
I guess the difference would be, is the violence against you because I don't like you, or because you refuse to be like me?
Oh, wow. What a great way to put that.
I'm good at
what do you think, Maddie?
I think I have to agree with Thorne. And it's also in the wording and in the context, because let's face it, we goof off with our friends every day, and there are some things that we say on the internet and in real life to our friends and family that would, you know, most people would gasp at in a lot of instances, because we'll take a look at our friends and we're like, well, if you say that one more time, I'm gonna slap the shit out of you, and we don't mean it. we don't mean it because we have
Sometimes.
a smile on our face. We tilt our head to one side, and we're rolling our eyes as we're saying it because basically what we're saying to our friend is, "I can't believe you just said that. Don't say it again."
Mm-hmm.
The left has just taken context and thrown it out the window to where, if you tell them that they're getting on your nerves, that they need to shut up, that we're going to do this, that, or the other, or slap them into the middle of next week, casually speaking, without meaning the violence behind it, all of a sudden you're in another argument as to how you bullied them online.
Yeah, the victim, the victim narrative.
Mm-hmm.
That definitely seems to be a debate tactic in our modern lexicon. Is you're being mean to me. Why are you being mean to me? Which is really frustrating. Okay, so right. So taking that.
You're racist because you disagreed with me. Sorry, I'm not going to get into that. I will rant.
Yeah, that's a different conversation. Let's see. I need to turn that off. Okay, there we go. Vlad the Dracul, for those who don't know, was the ruler of Wallachia. I'm sure everyone knows this. In 15th century, it was like 1476. So 15.
Yeah, it was a section of Romania.
Yes.
What is now Romania.
He fought with his brothers, cousins, everybody, local opposition, enemies from outside his little patch of the world, fought with everybody. I mean, that's just the way things were in 15th century Europe. However, this nasty bastard, when he took back his seat of power, and I'm sure everybody knows this story, but I'm just going to, for posterity, he impaled his opposition as a warning to any other opposition. And he's well known for a battle where as he was leaving the battlefield, he was stabbing people on sticks and leaving them to die there so that no enemies would follow him. You mentioned before, Thorn, that the distinction is between am I threatening you because I don't like you, or am I threatening you because you're not willing to be me? Is there a distinction to be made between terrorism on civilian populations as a political weapon versus terrorism against wartime opponents, such as a means of demoralizing the enemy? Because let's be real, demoralizing the enemy has been a tactic of war since man has been killing each other.
Oh yeah, I know so much about Vlad Dracul. Another thing that he did was there was a bunch of Ottoman, like they were coming to speak to him to basically, I'm not sure if they were trying to make peace or whatever, but they refused to take their hats off, and he didn't like that, so he basically nailed them to their heads and then sent them. And two of them he nailed it to their heads, and the third one he sent them back to say, "Yeah, tell them what I did." I think in the case of Vlad Dracul, it was a really brutal time, and he did these things as a form of psychological warfare. I am a scary motherfucker, don't fuck with me.
Do you see a difference between quote-unquote psychological warfare and terrorism?
I think that there's some overlap with them, maybe not with Vlad the Impaler, but there's definitely some overlap, because though he used terror, he was more using terror in a defensive way. He wasn't trying to change anyone's mind. He already had the everything. He was trying to keep the Ottomans out.
Maddie?
Going back to your previous question about the the civilians, and then my counter question to that would be, these civilians, would they be, in a sense, to use a crude term, collateral damage for emotional effect, or would these citizens actually be part of the rebellion or part of this particular movement that doesn't want these other people in? And I'm referring to Vietnam. In Vietnam, the U.S. soldiers had a problem telling the enemy apart from the non-combatants because they would literally send 4, 5, 6-year-olds into a crowd of GIs with a grenade for them to pull the pin, thereby killing themselves and any U.S. GI that was around.
Mm-hmm.
And that, in effect, shocked everybody that was watching, that heard these stories. But, if you look at it in a sense of collateral damage, that's a more emotional kind of response, because you've got this faction over here fighting with this faction on the other side, and then you have these absolutely determined non-combatants, these civilians caught up in the middle as collateral damage, and the outcry now becomes, why are they in the middle? Get them out of there. We need to save these people, so on and so forth, which is a completely different reaction from, oh my God, that 4-year-old just blew up 4 people.
And then you get the baby killer moniker.
Yes.
So is handing a child a grenade and sending him skipping into a group of GIs, is that terrorism, or is that dirty war?
Or is it a combination of both?
I think it's like Maddie said, it's a bit of an overlap here.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Well, okay, so what is the distinction on the overlap? And there's a method to my madness, and I'll get to it in a second. I really want to get a definitional idea of what psychological warfare is different, how psychological warfare is different from terrorism.
Well, I think in the case of Vietnam, they were not really given a choice.
Oh, the kids?
Yeah, the kids. They were not really given the choice. They were just told to do it. I think in the case of the Palestinian Authority, they are indoctrinated from a very young age to do stuff like that.
Well, but does that matter?
I don't think that it matters either way. But the difference here, I think, is that in the case of Vietnam, they were not given a choice. In the case of the Palestinian Authority, they have a choice.
Well, okay, to put the shoe on the other foot.
Can I add something?
Yeah, go ahead, Thorne. I'm sorry.
In the case of Vlad Tepes, I think that the army that he led didn't need to be like raised for that. They were protecting their homeland because the Ottomans were an invading force.
Yeah.
In World War II. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That also, going along Thorne's vein with Tepes, his scare tactics, like, you know, the pikes and the people on pikes and the heads on pikes, were a warning. That's your psychological warfare. That's your, if you come further into this territory, this is going to be your fate. Tread wisely, which is a vast difference from, you know, holding or taking a 12-year-old, putting a rifle in a 12-year-old's hand, teaching that 12-year-old how to fight, pointing in the direction and going, that's the enemy, they need to be dead.
Well, how is it different? Is sending the 12-year-old out or the 4-year-old with a grenade, is that not the same as saying, get out of my country or I'll continue to sneakily blow you up?
In the case of impaled body parts or impaled corpses, they have a choice as to whether or not they want to come further in. In the case of a 12-year-old or a 4-year-old that is armed with either a rifle or an explosive, it then becomes a shock value because you don't want to believe that this small child is about to kill you.
Right, and in that example, though, if I could, hold on, let me jump in real quick. In that example, though, the child would be the head on the pike.
Yes, but it's veiled because, and it's camouflage in a sense because nobody is going to expect a 4-year-old to pull a grenade out of a pocket and then
okay. I got you. I understand what you're saying. The distinction then would be that in the case of the impaled heads, it is a clear, you know, Achtung warning. Yeah, whereas with the child, it is an actual weapon.
Yeah, these were our enemies. This is what we did to them. This is what's going to happen to you if you venture further into our territory.
Okay, so in World War II, the Allied powers bombed Germany and specifically targeted civilian centers to make the German people lose the will to fight. Was that terrorism?
So basically what you're asking is demoralization terrorism?
Is purposefully targeting civilians for the purpose of demoralization terrorism? Yes.
Yes, it is.
In this case, yes.
So America and England and France, we are all terrorist sponsors of terror.
Well, you had to look at that particular time frame and what Germany was doing. Germany, under Hitler and his Third Reich, wanted to conquer. They didn't think there was anything they wouldn't be able to conquer. And once they conquered you, you had to do everything that they wanted you to do. And what gave them that power, what gave them that massive ego was the German people. The German people were behind them because they were looking at this as hope for a better future for Germany and the German people, because they had been going through so much strife and economic downturn since after World War I, that they were ready to latch on to anything and anyone. And here came Hitler. I will do this for you. We will rebuild Germany. We will be great again. And they weren't going to stop. And that's why they had the German people. And in order to break that, in order to break the army, unfortunately, they had to break the morale of the people of Germany. And that meant doing that collateral damage. That meant putting terror by bombing those city centers.
If I can
Go ahead, Thorne.
Expand on that, another question. So does that mean Hiroshima was terrorism?
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up. That Truman targeted that specifically to demoralize.
In a sense, I would probably have to say yes, because Japan at that time, with their divine wind and their religious ideology, really looked at their emperor as a god, and they were doing anything in service to their god. They were fanatical about it. And it came to the point where that was the only way that we believed that they were going to stop.
We were already flying planes over the emperor's palace, and they still weren't surrendering.
Yeah.
Yeah, they would never have surrendered. It's against their culture. Yeah. They're a warrior culture, and that was Truman's justification. Kill 500,000 Japanese, save 500,000 Allied lives, because taking Japan would have been incredibly costly in lives. But the thing is, once you make that decision, okay, we have to drop these weapons that we know are catastrophic on the enemy because they will not stop fighting, then the decision has to come, where are we going to drop them? Both Hiroshima and Nagasaki were civilian centers. They were basically industrial, but mostly civilian. It was a demoralizing tactic. Hence, and I agree with you, Maddie, I believe that was indeed a terrorist attack, even though it was during wartime. And that's the thing. Is the Geneva Convention, is that our line in the sand where we said, okay, we did some shitty shit in the past, but going forward, we're not going to be terroristic anymore?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you think that was the kind of the turning point for Western civilization in terms of not being terrorist?
I think so, especially when we saw the aftermath of those bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And then the question we have to ask ourselves is, in a time of war, what defines a terrorist attack and what is actually an act of war?
Good question, and thank you, because that is a perfect lead into my next topic. We're going to drop back 800 years from Vlad to Islamic terrorism, because there's a reason why I'm trying to make this distinction between act of war versus terrorism.
Why can't we do both? Sorry.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I guess because in the one case, if it's an act of war, you're justified. War is the only time murder is justified. I mean, that's kind of a societal
well, I mean,
exception.
In times of war, civilian casualties are going to happen. That's the inevitable conclusion of war. So
well, and if the goal is to win the war because your people are dying, if I'm all for a scorched earth policy. Eliminate the enemy entirely, even if that means killing civilians. Sorry, you civilians chose the leadership that you had, or you weren't willing to rise up and replace the bad leadership that led you into this situation. You reap what you sow. But I'm a realist.
There's our scorched earth, and then there was Russia's scorched earth, where they would drop back to fortify the holding line behind them and burn everything in their wake, so the Germans would not have any resources.
Right.
Yeah, they
which makes sense.
Which is also where the term originated from.
Yeah, which I mean, logically, from a war standpoint, makes sense. What I want to talk about is the Battle of Khaybar, which was it was a fight between Jews and Muslims, where Muhammad ordered one of his underlings. He said, whatever you want to do with these people, you make the decision. And the guy basically had them wholesale slaughtered, except those who would not rise up against Islam and converted. Now, this happened in 628, I think. Might have been 627, 629, somewhere in that range. But basically, it was massive slaughter, and the idea was convert or die. Since we see similar tactics playing out all over the Middle East and Africa, is it a fair assessment to put Middle Eastern, the Middle East, would it be a fair assessment to put the Middle Eastern Islamic world as being stuck in the 7th century, ideologically speaking? What I mean to say is the only thing that they've evolved on are really things that have been passed along from Western culture, because they haven't. We're seeing exactly the same behavior today as was happening in the 7th century. Is that a fair assessment to say?
Yes, it is. It's actually factually so, because from a certain period of time, I think it was like during the 7th century, like you said, the Islamic world up until that point was a leader in mathematics, in medicine, in astrology. They were very much enlightened, and then something along the way happened during the 7th century that basically cut them off from the world, completely isolated them, and that was the unfortunate effect of religious extremism.
Do you think it was coincided with the death of Muhammad? Because then they had all the fracturing into the different sects, and they couldn't decide on a succession.
No. That happened centuries after Muhammad's death.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So,
okay,
yeah.
I was just curious. I'm always looking for reasons why. Maddie,
Yeah.
what do you think on Islam being stuck, or the Islamic world rather?
I think they are. If you look at certain parts of it, I think Iran and at least Iran, they used to be like us. They used to be able to dress, and do as they pleased. But as Islam slowly took over, everything regressed, and Islam is stuck. It's ready for a reformation. The ideology as a whole is ready for a reformation. But
Thank you for bringing that up.
Clinging on, breaking up.
No, I said thank you for bringing that up. Please continue. I'm sorry.
But you have too many people clinging on to the fundamental word, to the literal texts that don't want it reformed.
Thorne, did you have an insight, or can I move on to the next question?
Huh?
Thorne's asleep. Okay.
No, she muted for like 5 minutes, so just move on.
I'm glad you brought up Reformation, because Islam teaches that it is the last iteration of God's word. That is a fundamental tenet of Islam. Is there even a possibility of a reformation, since to suggest one would be to speak against the word of the prophet, may peace be upon him? In the Quran and the Hadith, it says that Islam is it. Islam is the last thing. So if you say, well, maybe we can do a little better, wouldn't that be to go against Islam?
That would depend on who you ask. If you ask a moderate, or if you ask some of the people that have, for the better part, broken away from most of the ideology that's trying to change it, because you have a lot of moderate Islamists trying to reform it. They would say, no, it's not going against the word, because we are supposed to be a religion of relative peace, and this isn't the way we need it to be. However, if you look on the flip side of the coin, you have the fundamentalists that are saying, no, you cannot reform because we are going against the word of God. So once again, it would be a point of view type of debate to have.
Should the moderates even enter the conversation? They aren't the ones that are blowing up buildings. Why should we care that they even exist?
Also, Islam tried to have a reform. There's an offshoot called the Baha'i faith.
Really?
They're like, the Baha'i is an offshoot of Islam. They were basically either murdered or run out of the country.
Yep.
Wow.
They're actually headquartered in Israel, in Haifa.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Wow, I had no idea. I'm going to definitely look into that and learn more about them.
Yeah, there's a temple to the north of me. It's one of the most beautiful buildings I've ever seen.
I don't remember what Quran verse it is, but there is one that is really the catalyst, the backbone, the fundamental tenet of almost all terroristic or Islamic terroristic ideology groups, and that is the mischief in the land line. For those of you familiar with the Quran or have done any kind of Islamic research, you'll know that there's a line in the Quran that says I should just look it up. The premise is that those who commit mischief in the land are guilty of the worst kind of crime. So it's like blasphemy and mischief in the land, and therefore should be executed. The sentence is death. The problem with that line is that mischief in the land is completely nebulous. It is as vague as it gets. And so these takfir groups use that line to say people who speak against Islam, people who speak against Muhammad, the prophet, may peace be upon him, are creating mischief in the land and therefore are at war with Islam. Therefore, psychological warfare is on the table. And I am not justifying terrorism. However, I can see the dots that connect in someone's mind that gets them to blow up children. It's the same reason that we would bomb a civilian center in World War II. Because in their mind, we're at war. Because of that line in the Quran. Because of that, is it inevitable that as long as Islam exists, so will extremism and so will victims who have no idea they're even at war?
In its current form and interpretation, yes.
Okay, well, let me backstep. Because of the rules of Islam saying it's the last iteration, can there be a reformation? And if not, because of the rules of Islam, its current iteration will remain stagnant as it has been since the 7th century, yes?
Yes.
Yes, that is correct.
So we're pretty much fucked as long as Islam is on the planet, yes?
Well, we as in the state of Israel have been saying that for the last 60 years.
Yeah.
So, but nobody takes heed to what we have to say.
Yeah, what do you think on that, Thorne?
Yeah, I think as it exists now, without a large chunk of people basically being giant hypocrites about being Islamic, no, it's not going to happen. Because what's nice about most people's faith is, and I'm going to piss off a lot of people, but a lot of folks are kind of hypocritical about their holy books, except Islam. They take that shit serious, to the letter.
Well, and Donald Trump got in a lot of hot water during the campaign because he made a comment about taking out terrorist families. And I feel that, I hate to say it, but he might be on to something with that, because fire with fire seems to be the only possible way of stopping the ideology that is completely okay with suicide bombing, because there's no backlash in society. I wrote an article about this for publication a while back. And I was saying that the problem is that there's no societal backlash for suicide bombers, like the guy in Manchester who blew up the Ariana Grande. His act of terrorism to us was terrorism. To the people back home, it was an act of war, and he was celebrated. So the next guy is watching this on TV going, I could be a fucking hero. Instead of, once we figured out who this guy was, we sent in SEAL Team 6 and wiped out his entire extended family. The next guy's watching that going, fuck, I don't want grandma to get shot. It's psychological warfare versus psychological warfare. If we drop ourselves to that standard, have we given up the ideals that Western democracy is all about? And is it a realistic strategy?
Can I answer a question with a question?
But of course.
When you're talking about Islamic terrorists, here's the problem with going after their family. Now, not only have you made that terrorist a martyr, you've made his entire family a martyr. And now they have more propaganda to use against us. And I think that's the problem I have with that, is that, why are we giving them more fuel?
Yeah, you're right.
There is actually a middle ground, and I hate to keep going back to Israel, but they've actually employed it to quite a great degree of success. Instead of going after the family, in the Arab world, especially in the Muslim world, it's not so much about your life, it's about the place that you inhabit. Once you inhabit a place, it's considered Muslim. Israel, very successfully over the past few years, has engaged in collateral damage policy, which means if somebody has been identified as committing an act of terror, you don't go after his family. You tell his family you have a day to pack up your shit and get out, and then their house is demolished to the ground. And it's been terribly effective.
Yep.
That's okay. I like that. That's great. Thorne, I want to go back to what you said. I think that that's the danger of psychological warfare is that or terrorism. Anytime you're targeting civilians or people who may not even know they're involved, whenever you're hitting soft targets, you're going to embolden a certain percentage of your enemy. It almost seems destined to fail or result in a continuing escalation of violence.
It's more fuel on the fire.
Yeah, it really is. And the fire just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger because both sides just keep throwing more wood on. Maddie, what do you think on where we're going here?
Well, it all boils down to the question of how far are you willing to go to fight the beast without actually becoming the beast yourself?
Looking into the void.
Yeah, the abyss. Yeah.
Yeah, because, we can all devolve to the point of tit for tat, or as the Bible would say, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But you also have to ask yourself as a rational individual, will that actually work, or will that only serve to further anger the beast that you're fighting?
You won't know if it works until you apply it.
Yeah, wow, that's really interesting. It makes me wonder, those like Truman signing off to bomb Hiroshima and Nagasaki, he had to know that was a gamble because it could have just made the Japanese all that much more determined.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think they weigh stuff like that? Like, what's the likelihood that this is just going to be gas on a fire?
Yes.
I think they weigh that, and it all has to do with projections and educated guesses.
So is Antifa a terrorist group?
Yes, absolutely.
Maddie? Is Antifa, are they a terrorist group?
Antifa?
I believe they are, because they are not, anytime, it doesn't have to be a KKK group, it doesn't have to be a white nationalist group to show up for a rally. It can be a peaceful rally that counters anything that they believe in, that they stand for, and Antifa will show up, and Antifa will incite the violence. We saw it at Berkeley. We saw it in so many other instances before any of these white supremacists and white nationalist groups started showing up. Wherever there are people peacefully gathering against what Antifa and BLM believe in, one, the other, or both show up to cause a problem.
Yeah, I noticed in chat, Ogre just said I'm doing a video on BAM. I'm gonna talk about BAM in just a second. Go ahead, Finer Point.
Print, but yeah, Mrs. Finer Print is actually
sorry.
Mrs. Finer Print is actually next to me, and she says, "Hey, if it walks like a duck, and it talks like a duck, and it quacks like a duck, and it incites violence like a duck, it's a duck.
It's a violent duck."
Yeah.
BAM.
Mallard.
For those that don't know, yeah, go ahead, Thorne.
I wanted to touch on a few things in the chat before it gets completely away. Where is it? MC was saying about what I was saying about killing terrorists' families. MC is saying that they will use anything for propaganda, that I'm being silly. What do you think, that it doesn't matter?
He's not wrong, but what are your options at that point?
It's like being called a racist. Once you get called a racist 100 times for simply saying, whatever the stat is you're quoting, at a certain point you go, okay, whatever the fuck, just call me a racist, disprove my stat. I don't give a shit. It's once you've thrown so much propaganda out there, you can't try and avoid the propaganda. You know what I mean? You can't try and avoid the bullshit.
True. Yeah. At the same time, but there's a big difference between, like, if you destroy someone's house, it's a lot less sympathetic because you can rebuild somewhere else. You were given a chance to leave.
Yeah.
The point that Logical, I think, is trying to make here is that we're at war here. Okay, if we're gonna be worried about everybody's fifis all the time, this war either is not going to end or it's going to end badly on our end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting you say we're at war, because I think that we're at war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and these are air quotes, war. I think that Americans and America in general looks at us being in a war with Iraq and Afghanistan, but not the real enemy that we're at war with. And until we identify and have the balls to stand up and say, our enemy has identified us and called us by name, it's time we do the same. We're fighting Islam, at least the sects of it that are intent on wiping out anyone that's not part of them.
Yeah. Yep.
It's difficult when you're fighting an idea instead of a person.
Indeed.
And
Well,
also,
that's why the KKK still exists.
Otha had pointed out that Afghanistan, and I would like to add also like Iran and Iraq, at one point they were living under a reformed version of Islam. So that's kind of proves that it is possible.
Iran in the 1960s, right before the Shah took over, or whatever the fuck, before that shit happened, was basically a cosmopolitan, Western, democratic-looking place. It was gorgeous. I looked at these old black and white pictures from right before the revolution, and I was like, "Damn, that is a gorgeous place."
Yeah,
Yeah,
look at
it
Lebanon
was
as
a
well.
secular state.
Yeah.
Lebanon
Man,
used to be Lebanon used to be called the Paris of the Middle East. And look at it today.
Right. Beirut. I remember when Beirut was getting blown to shit in the 80s. Also, I believe Afghanistan was also very cosmopolitan as well, and I think it was the Soviets, their intervention, I think, kind of fucked everything up there.
Also,
I don't want to... Go ahead.
Sorry, he brought up also Egypt is largely a secular state up until really, really recently.
Yeah, Arab Spring that fucked it over. Now I'm not going to go to Egypt. Great. I wanted to see the pyramids.
Me too.
Me too.
avoid Muslim. My list of countries that we're going to travel to is anytime it's a Muslim country, we scratch it off. It's just not worth the risk to me. Anyway, moving on. Speaking of Antifa, I want to kind of stay on that vein. I've got a video I want to play now. Unfortunately, I can't do sound, but fortunately, this video doesn't need sound. And I had another one that I was trying to find, but it was unlucky on, so I'm just going to give a synopsis of that ties into this. Let me get to that screen. Bear with me. Oh, there we go. Okay. This little ball of fun, not this skinny dude in front, but the you can't really see her yet. Her name is Yvette Falarka. She's a middle school teacher and the organizer / creator of BAM. BAM is a group in California called By Any Means Necessary. Okay, they're not just in California, they're actually nationwide, but they started in California. By Any Means Necessary. We have BAM to thank for Antifa. BAM was the original organizers of the Antifa movement, which then grew out of BAM. Interesting.
Do you know where the name By Any Means Necessary comes from?
I do not.
By any means necessary was Malcolm X's catchphrase in the 60s to fight for equality. It is the main reason that Martin Luther King Jr. branched off from Malcolm X instead of continuing to help him, because Malcolm X started becoming more and more militant.
Interesting. And now we have Talcum X, Sean King.
Oh, God.
So anyway, By Any Means Necessary is a nasty little group, and this is a nasty little bitch who founded it. The mayor of Berkeley was found after the riots to have been a member of the BAM Facebook group. Remember that the Berkeley police were told from on high to stand down so that people like this little shitbird, and this is during the Berkeley riots, this little scene, so that this little shitbird, Yvette Falarka, could assault people without any kind of repercussions. Now, there she is with a little black hair right there. Watch what she's doing. You see that? Just kidney punching the dude. And then he's pulled back to the ground and stomped on and kicked on. And here she is right here. Right there. She's a piece of shit. So anyway, taking it over to the next video that I was unable to find, it was an interview with another organizer of BAM. And the interviewer said, so what is the point of BAM? What exactly does that mean? And she said that By Any Means Necessary translates to make it so painful and uncomfortable to have these thoughts, these neo-Nazi, fascist ideologies, that nobody will want to have them. Is there a more clear definition of terrorism than that?
The only clearer one would be in the dictionary, literally.
With a picture of Yvette Falarka next to it.
Yeah, with a picture of freaking Yvette Falarka and whoever is currently leading Antifa in a mask.
If
Yeah.
Yeah. If we're going to go by the dictionary definition of terrorism, terrorism is the enactment of violence in order to further political goals.
Mhm.
So in
Okay,
that
so
regard, Yvette Falarca and BAM are exactly that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if it's obvious to us, oh, I'm sorry, Maddie. Go ahead. You want to opine?
I was just agreeing.
Oh, okay. Who is it in chat that's saying that BAM was not the origination point? BAM was the organizers behind the event that created Antifa, is what I'm saying.
Was
They
a broken-hearted liberal is the one who's
Yeah,
saying
okay.
that on the chat.
Yeah.
And if you've got information to contradict me and prove me wrong, I'm always open to that. I love being proven wrong.
No, like they didn't like spark. They didn't directly spark the formation of Antifa, I think was liberals' point.
They worked together with the founders of Antifa. BAM did, and in organizing this event. But anyway, I know that's minutia. I don't want to get caught up in that. The point is, so if it's very, very clear to us, looking at this, going, okay, by their own words, they're saying we're going to hurt anyone, and make it incredibly uncomfortable / painful. She literally said painful. To have these thoughts, wrong think. If it's so apparent by their own words as well as their own actions, because let's not forget, the neo-Nazis, which I hate that term because Nazis don't even exist, the white supremacists at Charlottesville brought shields and flags, as well as, helmets and whatnot. Antifa brought M80s, sticks, balloons filled with piss. These are not defensive weapons. These are not things meant to keep you safe. If it's so obvious by their actions and their own words that this is a terrorist organization, why the fuck does it take a petition being circulated to get any kind of attention in that direction? Where the hell is our governance?
The governance is too busy being liberal and kowtowing to the mainstream media, who doesn't want to call out Antifa when Antifa and any of these other groups show up.
But where are the Republicans? Where are these supposed right-wingers who are supposed to be supporting these folks?
Campaigning for president 3 years too early?
That would be the question. I mean,
Yeah.
I have looked, and it's bad when on my newscast, the only way that I got confirmation that it was Antifa and BLM that showed up in Charlottesville is when I went to the It's Going Down website, and they were gloating about being there and causing shit. Because you have this massive group of people, not only in Washington, but in the mainstream media and in the population as a whole, that are too busy pointing at the quote-unquote so-called Nazis and saying, well, they were there, they were causing the trouble, and then, here came the quote-unquote counter-protesters. Well, if you're going to call out the KKK, Vanguard America, and other white nationalists and white supremacist group by name, start calling out Antifa and Black Lives Matter and BAM.
Well said. Finer? Finer print?
Broken Heart Liberal did mention that even before the petition, New Jersey's like, nope, they're a terrorist organization.
Yeah, I saw that as well. Yeah, that's good on New Jersey. You think that had a lot to do with old Chubby Christie?
Nothing has to do with Chris Christie. He's useless.
Krispy Kreme has to do.
I got distracted. I'm sorry.
I think Chris Christie is so disliked at this point that if he said Antifa was a terrorist organization, the rest of New Jersey would say nope, just to disagree with him.
So let me scare the shit out of you. Islam, the tenets in Islam. I'm derailing back to Islam. I'm gonna bounce a couple of things. Islam. Stuck in the 7th century, we all agreed on that because the tenet of Islam is that this is the last iteration. It can never get better, therefore stuck in the 7th century. The KKK, first iteration KKK, and I believe that they were a terrorist group. They were trying to achieve a political aim. First wave KKK, 1865 to 1871, I think, was when they had prominence. Except here we are 200 years later, roughly 150 years later, there's still a remnant because it's an ideology. Islam has 1.6 billion converts across the world because it's an ideology. Antifa is operating with a foundational ideology. Even if we declare them a terrorist group, they're not going away, because no ideology ever fully dies out, except for, like, the Whigs or something. Is Antifa? I mean, I guess a better idea would be to ask that: is a chunk of Antifa going to be with us from now until the end of time?
That is a good question. And I've seen other videos on the classification of Antifa terrorist group, and Prince of Queens was alluding to comparing them to the KKK, and that if they did this, and then they were like, well, why not the KKK? The problem is 150 years ago, when the KKK first started rearing their head, there was not a homeland security. There was not, there were not all these other things in place in our government to say, okay, we need to declare these people as a national terrorist group. There wasn't anything like that, so they were never declared. By the time it came around to them possibly being declared, they started dying down on their more militant actions and started dying down on the lynchings and the cross burnings and stuff before they were even on a watch list.
Also, sorry.
That's all right.
Go ahead.
Actually, I have something for you to masticate on logical. You said that the Arab world or the Muslim world got stuck in the 7th century, so they're essentially regressed, correct?
Mm-hmm.
The left.
Well, I wouldn't say regressed. I would say stagnant.
Stagnant. That's fair. That's fair. The left has been regressing for the past century and a half, I would say, because they also are the originator of the KKK, or at least the Democratic Party was. I have noticed consistently that people on the left align themselves with Muslims and Muslim terrorist groups all the time. Why do you think that is?
Tolerance.
Yeah,
the
for
false idea
the tolerance.
That would I would say it's for the points, the virtue points.
Nope.
Okay,
Nope.
why do you think?
It's not that. It's communism. If you look at all of the Western-led terrorist groups, maybe with the exception of the IRA, they were all radical communists, and they were engaged. Baader-Meinhof, Rot Faction, the Red Faction. All of those people were very ideologically entrenched in communism, and in the Arab world, they found allies that could help them achieve their goals, because they could teach them how to enact acts of terrorism. So fast forward 50 years, 60 years till today, and you get people, I don't remember his name, from the Weather Underground. I forgot his name, but in any case, this was an organization that enacted acts of terror in the United States. It was deemed a domestic terror organization, far left, communist almost in nature. It all, to me, and this is just my point of view, I know I'm just rambling here, but to me, all of these groups formed together in this discombobulated, maybe not so much a cohesive unit, but they're all on the same ideological front. If it's Islam, if it's the left. So, I mean, that's just where I'm standing.
Because Islam is very much not a left-wing thing at all.
Not in the way we see it.
In chat, MC says, no, they align themselves because they see common enemies. Were we talking about rational groups? I would say that's probably likely. But I don't see them as looking at it as the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I legitimately think that it's spot on. I think you're right. You're exactly right, Finer Friend. I'm with you on that 100%. And so I don't really think that it's a common enemies phenomenon. And I wanted to bring up the Baader-Meinhof gang, and I'm glad you actually mentioned these other groups, because I wanted to ask if Antifa, because its foundation is in communism, socialism, ideology, whatever their bullshit is, because they'll never go away. There's going to be a fringe group. Is it only a matter of time before America has their own Baader-Meinhof?
Well, they did. That's why I mentioned the Weather Underground was Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dorn. I mean,
but were they blowing shit up?
Yeah, they blew up a, what was it, a police station? They killed like 8 police officers.
Oh wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, back in the 70s.
Oh yeah, I'm an idiot. No, I don't know a lot about American history. To be honest with you, I'm more European.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, President Obama, our esteemed beloved leader, was starting his political career at their kitchen table. Bill Ayers was actually one of his consultants.
That name,
in the
Bill
White House.
Ayers. That I was thinking that there was an Obama connection when you were saying Bill Ayers. That I knew that name. Yeah,
So,
interesting.
yeah.
So
There you go.
are we? Again, I go back to this original question because I don't want to be doom and gloom, but it seems to me that terrorism, as was it Macron? Who the fuck said terrorism is just something we got to get used to? I hate to admit it, but he may have been right.
I believe that was Macron. Yeah.
Kind of like how if you live in a city, it's gonna have.
Oh no, sorry, that was Sadiq Khan.
That was a Muslim mayor of London that said that. And I can't.
Well, he said. I think some French dude said it first, and then a few months later, the con man.
The part and parcel thing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Part and parcel. Yes. So was he right?
No, he wasn't right. It shouldn't have to happen in the Western world.
Except this whole hour we've been talking has really, I felt, kind of refined it down to there will never be a reformation of Islam because it goes against the book. They're stuck in the 7th century where it says you have to chop heads and blow shit up.
Mm-hmm.
They'll never stop. So how the fuck, Yep. How do we...
I'll give you Israel as the example one more time. Israel had a rash of terror attacks ever since its inception. I mean, nonstop. What happened over the last few years that dropped the amount of terror attacks dramatically in major cities? Israel built a wall. And not just any wall. It built a wall that encompasses the West Bank, and they have very strict border crossing between the Gaza Strip and the Israeli territories, and they just don't give a shit anymore.
Are there still attacks?
There are still attacks, but they have a lot less means to actually enact those attacks. They don't get as much support and funding like they used to. They don't have free moving from between territories, Egypt or Jordan or anything like that. Israel's wall has been a resounding success when it comes to
coupled with the wall that they are now going to build to block the underground tunnels to keep the Palestinians.
Yep, precisely.
Is going to further curtail that. And then you have, I think it's Poland, who told the EU to piss off. We're not taking in any migrants, and they're building a wall as well, I believe, to keep the migrants out.
Yep.
It's also vigilance, and the problem is vigilance also comes with this double-edged sword question. How many freedoms are you willing to give up to stop the terrorism?
That's exactly right. And also,
great.
There's an isolationist standpoint here that I don't necessarily subscribe to. Building a wall is great and all, but eventually you want to be able to live your life without being an isolationist, because otherwise you'll end up just like the Muslims from the 7th century.
Well,
same problem.
Oops, sorry. My sort of isolationism. I know I'm mispronouncing that. My tongue isn't working all of a sudden.
Isolationism.
Thank you. Goes for this. How can we solve the ills of the world when we can't even feed, clothe, and house ourselves at this point?
Yeah. Good question. As far as Islam, extrapolating out, if building a wall is seemingly the only real effective way to stop the spread of terrorism as we know it today, if every country builds a wall and every country adopts an isolationist standpoint, are we just paving the road to World War III?
No, I think quite the opposite. You're paving the road to having a world that is not communicating with each other, and that's it.
Is that a good thing?
Not necessarily. No, I don't think that it's a good thing. I'm not saying that the wall is, the panacea for solving the problem of terrorism. It's a part of a concerted effort to stop immediate attacks against civilians.
As MC said, walls can have gates.
Yeah, true.
Walls can have gates. Walls could be scaled on with ladders. Walls can be torn down. That's not the point. The wall, going back to the beginning of this chat, is a psychological thing.
Right, and hold on, the chat's going off about again, the walls can have gates. You can communicate through a wall. We have phones, that kind of shit. I'm not so much talking about physicality. I'm talking about the mentality. When North Korea split off from South Korea, they began to change. They diverged. Japan from China way back early. Fuck China from itself during the Three Kingdoms era. Mongolia. I mean, you could just go down pretty much every country in Hitler. Jesus, in the United States, the Civil War. When you start to isolate yourself, it tends to lead to othering and suspicion, which leads to fear. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. You know what I mean? It seems the psychological damage is there.
When you separate any group of people from the rest of the group of people, kind of like in genetics, you don't have any diversity of thought. Everybody thinks the same way, and then they become unable to handle any ideas that are counter to their own.
Otha in chat, you see that, Thorn? Can you read that?
Japan is a great study in isolationism gone wrong. Their economy was crumbling at a very rapid pace until they were forced to open their borders in the 1870s. Also, funny side note, Japanese animators are currently having a serious trouble finding talent within Japan, like in any style that diverges from their own. Gee, I wonder why that is.
Funny. What do you think, Maddie? Do you think isolationism is the first step towards suspicion of your neighbor and therefore war?
Well, total isolationism, yes. But regulated or moderated type of isolationism, no. Because if you open or keep the open communication lines in between the different countries and keep the immigration laws as they should be in the books, you will still have people coming into your country, but these people will be vetted. You will still be talking to your allies, and you will still be, to a certain point, keeping tabs on your enemies if you moderate your isolationism.
Right, and we do have the internet. This isn't the Middle Ages.
Yeah, and for like I said, my isolationism is you have to take care of your own first. You can't spend so much money on other countries to the point where your country is falling apart, because then sooner or later you're going to be looking to these countries for help because you don't know what went wrong.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, another thing. I mean, when you go to see your neighbors, you don't just sit in your neighbor's house and wait for them to feed you or anything like that. When you have the domain of your home, you don't just let anybody walk into your living room. So why should it be any different for a state, for a country?
So do you think that if we the Western democracies put up walls and shut ourselves off from the degenerative Middle East cultures, they will continue to blow themselves up? Do you think there will ever become a point where they either kill themselves off to the point of where we won't have to worry anymore, and the walls will just become decorative? I mean, is there an end in sight is really the question. If we stop the flow right now and just sit back and kind of watch them kill each other, is there an end in sight?
Well, you can't stop the flow. You can abate it. You can slow it down. Immigration is going to happen. People are going to migrate no matter what you do. But unchecked immigration, complete and utter chaos, like what's happening in Sweden right now, what's happening in Europe. No, you like Maddie said, they have to be vetted correctly. You can't just let them in willy-nilly. That's the problem that we're having and we're experiencing in the West right now, is that we're just letting everybody in because feelings.
What do you think, Maddie?
I agree with finer print. I mean, it's the reason why, even though the first one was poorly worded, that Trump was doing his executive orders for the travel ban, because we don't have very stringent vetting processes. You need a sponsor, yes. You need a reason for coming to this country. You can get visas for being a student. You can get visas for working in this country. But once you're here, and a lot of people let those visas expire and henceforth become illegal immigrants, because that's the problem that we have in this country. And all he wanted.
It's not unusual.
No, it's not unusual. And, what he wanted to do was vet these people coming into the country to see if anyone at all in their family had terrorist ties, to keep those people out of the country, which I believe is reasonable. You can't open your borders and say, okay, we will accept everybody because we know your country is war-torn. We know you're having a problem, because let's say for every 3 people that are actually refugees that want a better life, that are trying to escape the war zone because they're tired of struggling and hiding and running from all these people, you have at least 5 people that aren't true refugees in the sense of the word, that are coming to cause chaos.
See, I think the problem is it's not so much what Trump has been trying to do, is more what the left has been doing ever since he said, this is what I'm going to do. It's like, to quote Gary Johnson, what is Aleppo? What is vetting? What is vetting? What is prime meridian?
Oh,
like,
if I can interject for a moment.
Go ahead, Thorne.
Also, with the whole Muslim ban, I'm going to call it that because that's what Trump called it. A lot of these countries are also so war-torn, it's kind of impossible to actually make 100% sure that the person that they say they are is who they say they are. So it kind of makes sense to make a full stop from those countries as well.
Well, especially in Syria, where ISIS actually took over the building where passports were made. They had the Syrian passport production facility under their control. In the chat, Broken Heart Liberal a little while ago said, in quotes, taking care of your own. Can projecting power on the world not serve your own? Just curious. And this is a great question, because when it comes to Afghanistan as an example, when Al-Qaeda, even though 14 to 16 were from Saudi Arabia, they were still members of Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda's base was Afghanistan. They and the Taliban basically ran Afghanistan. When 9/11 happened, why did we not, as a country, kick back to the colonial days and say enough is enough, clean house, and make a 51st state? Why do we not do that anymore? Because I'm with Broken Heart Liberal here. Projecting power and stopping the problem in its entirety is better than trying to help and just getting shot for your trouble. Is it not? And as a follow-up, colonialism did great things for a lot of African nations who now have economic advantages over their neighbors who weren't colonized by European countries. Is colonization in and of itself a bad thing? First question was about terrorism, second one, colonization.
Yeah, we've gone on a bit of a tangent, huh?
Yeah.
I'm not prepared for that question.
Okay, so let's start with the terrorism question then. If you already know that if you go into Afghanistan, I'm using that as the example. If you know that going into Afghanistan is going to cost you men, it's going to cost you lives, it's not going to be a good thing. Why don't you go in and say, okay, you fuckers want to attack us, you're ours now. We're going to take your resources, we're going to take your nation, you belong to us. We used to do that. Well, okay, yeah, we did used to do that against the Native Americans. You attacked us, we're going to take your fucking land. Why don't we do that anymore?
That would all depend on what is actually written in the Geneva Convention Accords. I know a lot of it has to do with torture and, how war should be conducted. There was a time when, Obama wanted to shut down Guantanamo Bay for war prisoner trials and bring those terrorist prisoners over to the United States, which would have caused an entirely different mess, because instead of being tried as war criminals, they would have been tried in, the court system of the U.S., And a lot of people argued that would then, put more work on the troops to, have a quote unquote chain of evidence, keep the chain of evidence pure in order to prove that these guys were actual terrorists.
Yes, plus it's also affording non-U.S. citizens U.S. privileges.
And rights.
Yeah, rights,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, it was.
Continue, Maddie. I'm sorry to cut you off.
It's you have to make a distinct difference in between our laws and how you handle the trial of war criminals. Once you start blurring that line, you cause other problems, because when Bush said we are going to fight terrorism, this is a war on terrorism, my first thought was, you have now entered a never-ending war. For the fact that if you find and eradicate one terrorist cell, 2 to 4 cells are going to pop up somewhere else. It's never ending.
Well, and you have to play world police.
Mm-hmm.
You literally have to play world police. Boko Haram in Africa. Jesus, all the ones in the Middle East, all the different terrorist groups. How can you stop such a widespread problem?
Hey, we have a squid in our midst.
Hello.
Omegon!
I am so sorry I'm late. I literally just got in. Went to a family sort of meetup, so I'm very sorry.
We are talking about annexing other countries who are terrorizing us. Philippines, MC in the chat said, and hello, Omegon. Actually, hold on, I'll pause. Do your hi, I'm Omegon, this is my thing. You know what I mean? Give a short little intro of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Omegon, and this is my thing.
All right, that works. That works. And we'll do the shilling, the shameless plugs at the end of the cast.
Yeah, I think Omegon would want to annex the country that makes the best sandwiches.
Yeah,
I live next to a town called Sandwich, so all's good here.
That's amazing. In the chat, and what we're talking about right now is literally annexing countries. MC says, why didn't we do that with the Philippines? We took them from we defeated Spain and took it. Why didn't we turn it in the 51st state? I'm going to use that as a springboard to my next question. Is colonization in the 21st century intrinsically bad?
Nope.
Oh, that's a loaded question. It would depend, because in the sense of Puerto Rico, they have been, every once in a while it comes up for a vote as to whether or not they want to be the 51st state. And the vote has never gone through as an overwhelming approval in order for them to be a 51st state, which is why they're still a territory.
This is the closest it's been, and that's because the opposition party basically told all their people to not show up.
Yeah.
But weren't they protesting or something?
Yeah. I don't know how they think that that's a protest, but okay.
Yeah, when
Okay,
your
Puerto Rico.
opposition, when your opposition doesn't show up and you still lose the election, that kind of tells you something.
What is a Puerto Rican protest? What does it look like?
Siesta.
That's why the
A lot
Spaniards
of poor
lost the
people
war.
getting sassy.
They show up, yell, get hungry, and go home. That's pretty much it, I think.
Well, yeah, I think like whenever it's Puerto Ricans showing up to protest, it's all poor people because the whole island is fucking broke.
Yeah.
Do you think the reason that people are, well, they haven't yet become the 51st state is because no one can be bothered to recall all the flags with only 50 stars on?
Completely have to redesign it.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, can any of you think of a country in history or a nation state or a civilization who, when I think back, the most powerful or the most economically powerful were always the ones who were also the most militarily powerful? Can you think of one that does not meet those criteria?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the full question.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. As I think back through history, the countries that had the most economic power and growth and civilization growth were also the ones with the strongest military. Do you agree or disagree with that statement?
Yeah, I mean, just look at the Roman Empire.
Yeah, exactly. The Persians, the
Yeah.
Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great, the Egyptians, yada, yada, yada. We can go through the list. So, extrapolating that, because America is the world's strongest military by a factor, Not just we're a little bit better. It's a factor. It's an exponential with the strongest military. Should we use that military to bring American values to parts of the world that don't have them? And again, go back to the colonization idea. Should we use the military in the way that historical nations have in the past?
I can't really agree with that completely, but I would say in cases of Haiti, we do need to regulate it a little bit, not to bring our beliefs and our way of doing things to them, but let's face it, every time Haiti, and yeah, I'm pronouncing it the Spanish way, every time Haiti has, had a natural disaster or anything, and their government is a complete mess, they're always looking for people to give them money, to donate money to them, to donate resources and foodstuffs to them, and they squander it, bringing them back down to square one. You can't, in the case of Haiti and other countries like that, you can't just throw money and resources at a problem and hope they'll figure it out. You need to go with these money and resources, sit down with them, help them establish a government that works, and once it's rolling, go, okay, you got this. We're going to go back home now. That's the problem the U.S. has. We'll go in these countries and we'll do this stuff. We'll set up these governments, and we will stay. We're still in South Korea. We're still in Germany. We're still in all these places that we have sent troops in. We've been able to close the deal and say, okay, you're fine. You got this. We're going to bring these troops back home now.
So would you say that the problem with colonization would also be the not leaving?
Mm-hmm.
You set shit up. You got what you wanted, now leave.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with regard to bases long after the war, financial aid, or I guess financial aid would be a good way of putting that. Foreign aid to other countries is very unpopular in America. It always has been. So what our brilliant government has devised is a way to use the military budget to funnel resources to other countries. So when we build a base in another country, typically we rent the land. We station troops there who go off base and spend money, thereby feeding the economy American dollars. It is a way to funnel money to other countries using our military budget. It's sneaky, it's shitty, but it is what it is. Anyway, going back to the idea of colonization. Terrorism, and I want to tie this kind of premise. We live in an age where terrorism seems almost endemic, and until every country builds their own wall, and we kind of, as we've discussed, and I mean, unless you guys disagree with what we've come with so far, the only way to really stop this flow of terrorism is to become a certain level of isolationist. If that's the mentality, would it not be in our best interest? Say Haiti has some natural resources, and say terrorists are coming from Haiti. I know they're not, but let's just say for the sake of argument they are. Would it not be in our interest to not only acquire the resources that would then grow our economy, plus some more cheap labor, and stop this hotbed of terrorist growth, thereby nullifying the idea of colonization, and instead it's protecting our interests? Yes? Wouldn't it be protecting our interests to invade Haiti and take it over and make it the 51st state if it had resources and terrorists were coming from it?
Omegon?
Hello?
You might still be looking for a mouse. Hello.
No, I'm here.
Did you hear the question?
Hello? No, because I went to go and get a battery for my mouse, so I missed most of that.
Okay, if Haiti had natural resources and was a hotbed of terrorist production, would it not be in America's best interest, if America was the target of the terrorism, to take over Haiti and just take it? 51st state.
I guess I would say it depends. Does Haiti have its own government?
Yes.
I'm not too familiar with Haiti. Geography's not my strong.
Yes, they do. Haiti was, I think they're the only successful slave rebellion.
Really?
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah, but look at their state now.
Oh shit!
A deal. It could look on the outside to others. It could look like America took over, but Haiti could still retain some freedoms. I guess it depends on the circumstance. I think it would. Oh, it would look terrible, wouldn't it, if America went over and just took it?
Really, really fucking. It's like the worst
but that's my
possible country to
point.
do that to.
But that's my point. When you have a military that's 26 times, or when you have a military that is larger than the next 26 countries, why should you give a shit?
Also, as a small aside, part of the reason that Haiti is doing so poorly is because they ended up starting out behind because they were forced to pay the French back for all of the slaves that were then freed. So they actually started out in debt.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Speaking of slave labor, I have to go and mow the lawn. So, yeah, go check out my channel, The Finer Print on YouTube. Peace out, guys.
Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Print.
Big Fat Brian, I love that quote. If an injury has to be done to a man, it should be so severe that his vengeance need not be feared. Was that? I think that's Machiavelli, if memory serves. But I think that's that's my greater point. Is if we're being attacked, the Chihuahua. When the Chihuahua gnaws on the Mastiff's leg, there's only a matter of time before the Mastiff turns around and eats him. Why don't we eat the Chihuahuas?
Because with enough Chihuahuas, the Mastiff's going to be in trouble.
Is there enough Chihuahuas in the world to contend with we, the Mastiffs? And I'm not talking about Russia and China. I mean, obviously, we're not going to fuck with them.
No.
But like Haiti and Argentina and all these little shitbag Central American countries that have shit economies, crime central, are with our porous southern border, are gateways for terrorists to come into America. They haven't yet, thank goodness. But it's possible down the road they could.
Well, I mean, it's like, and I say this jokingly, but I think the reason why the terrorists haven't come up through our southern border yet is because I think that if they tried to, you would have the people from San Salvador and Guatemala and Mexico pointing to the people going, they're not us. They're not us.
A lot of them are just not going to make it because the folks are like, oh, hey, yeah, I'm just going to rob you.
Right.
They're just not going to make it.
Yeah.
Those are dangerous countries to be in if you have no ties.
Exactly. That and the fact that, going back to me jokingly putting this, but with a serious note, with the coyotes and the business that they're having, ferrying these illegal immigrants across the border, the last thing they want is the border monitored so closely because these Middle Eastern people have snuck in with the rest of the group.
Mm-hmm.
And so the coyotes are going to look at it as, okay, we've got to keep these people out of this because they're going to screw up this thing we got going.
Yeah, they're just going to shoot them.
Yeah.
Yeah, very true.
MC said they've come across the southern border.
Yeah,
we in the UK we don't use guns to protect our border. We use swords and shields because we're amazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
you use cliffs. The
cliffs
actually, I do live near the cliffs of Dover, so yeah, we have those too.
So do you also use a stern word?
We write letters of complaint and we queue up to post them. We complain about the queuing up as well. And the lack of tea.
Shield swords and stern word letters.
How culpable do you think Saudi Arabia should have been for the 9/11 attacks, given that 14 of the 16 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia?
They should have been held culpable. They should have been, because
I'm assuming haven't been because of special deals made between them and America for weapons or whatever.
Oh yeah.
So Saudi Arabia has oil. Lots and lots of oil. We buy most of our oil from Saudi Arabia. Going back to my question regarding Haiti, 14 of the 16 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia. They came out by way of Afghanistan. However, they were Saudi Arabian. That says a little something about what's going on in Saudi Arabia. Plus, women finally get to drive, sort of, in Saudi Arabia. There was a 35-year-old woman whose husband was horribly ill in Saudi Arabia who went to the market to get food. She didn't have a choice. She had no kids. It was just her and her husband. 35 years old. While at the market, she is accosted and stoned to death for not being with her man in public. This is Saudi Arabia. Because they have oil, why the fuck don't we just take Saudi Arabia?
Well, the better question is, why are we still, relying ourselves on Middle Eastern oil? We have reserves in Alaska. We have reserves here in the United States. You know, we have enough oil to run our own country from our own territories and our own states. I mean, the pipelines that we have coming from Alaska coming down here give us the oil we need to refine it into gasoline and diesel fuel and things of that nature, to where we don't really need to rely on Middle Eastern oil, but we're still doing it.
Okay,
But
so
in chat, I need to interject real quick.
yeah, no.
MC in chat corrected me, and he is correct. I was mistaken to say that we buy most of our oil. I meant to say we buy a lot, but thank you. I appreciate that correction.
Do you think that the reason that they decide to buy a lot of their oil, your country that is to deplete their resources to the point where one day you will be the power in oil reserves or whatever?
Well, yeah, that's not totally going to work, though.
The game, as it were.
That's given us way too much credit.
Yeah, I really hope that's not the case, because I don't think people realize how much like Saudi Arabia has been diversifying when it comes to like various sources of energy. They're probably one of the biggest. They support a lot of R&D for like alternative energy because they know the oil's not going to last forever, and they're not stupid.
Yeah.
Maddie?
Well, I mean, it's just, we need to, in cases of things of that nature and commodities that we're trading with other countries, we need to make sure, like she says, it's not going to last forever. Natural gas isn't going to last forever. The oil, the fossil fuels as a whole are not going to last forever. We need to, take these things out of R&D, make these prototypes, test these prototypes, and put these vehicles and conveyances and other forms of energy, put the rubber to the road, so to speak. Get these things rolling out. The problem is you have the big oil companies that don't want that because that's going to cut into their profits.
It's true, yeah.
Those are one of the major lobbyists in our government, and that, the lobbyists have a lot of the power as far as our Congress making decisions are concerned.
Yeah, it's
anybody that doesn't think that a politician isn't in somebody's pocket is naive at this point.
Yeah, and the big problem I have with business and government is business is short-sighted. All they care about is profit in the meantime, and they don't see the long-term harm that anything causes.
Well, in migration,
yeah,
it's crazy because migration, like what's going on in Europe, actually greatly benefits large corporations. So, of course, they would be all for open borders and funding the EU and lobbying the shit out of having very leftist liberal policies when it comes to immigration policy. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Broken Heart Liberal in chat. She said Saudi Arabia actually funds extremist imams in Britain, as far as I know. And you were saying that they've been diversifying their portfolio, but they've also been diversifying their terrorism portfolio, because it was recently, well, I don't know about recently, maybe a year or two ago, I don't know if it was WikiLeaks, but someone released a whole bunch of information about where Saudi Arabian money goes. And it literally goes to extremists, mosques, and training of terrorists in countries all over the fucking world. They literally are the #1 state sponsor of terror across the world.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they're one of our major trading partners. Is it not hypocritical to declare yourself at war with terror and then give money to the people who are funding your enemy?
Absolutely.
It is very.
So how do we? How do we stop it? I mean, we have. Oh, and you asked earlier why we're dependent on foreign oil, and the answer to that is 2 words: Al Gore. The environmental lobby prevents us from being sufficient on our own because spotted owls and shit.
Yeah.
So again, if we can't dig in Alaska because, someone might upset a seal, and we need the oil and Saudi Arabia has it, is our option to either accept that terrorism is just a part of the world or invade Saudi Arabia? Am I being too one or the other, too black or white?
It's very possible. I'm trying
Can
to
you think of a different option? I mean, is there a third option?
Well, we know putting sanctions on Saudi Arabia would cause a big problem.
Mm-hmm. They have us by the balls.
Yeah.
No, they don't.
Okay, no, they don't?
No. We have plenty of oil. The only thing that we do not have are the refining capabilities. That's what we...
Expand on that. What do you mean?
we don't have the refineries to process the requirements needed for this country. It's not a lack of oil, it's a lack of refineries. We've got 100 years worth of oil sitting in reserves.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, because
And actually it was 100 years worth of oils back in the mid 90s, and we still haven't touched it. We still stockpile it.
Yeah, I remember hearing that in the 90s as well. I graduated in 96, and I definitely remember hearing that we had a shit ton in reserve. I had no idea that it was the refinery. Okay, so in the world's strongest economy, why the fuck don't we build refineries?
The EPA.
The EPA. That's
Oh, fuck Al Gore.
Yep.
That's
Exactly.
that's where they have us by the balls. Right there.
MC in chat is saying NAMBLA is why we have the. I didn't know you
NIMBA.
remember
NIMBA.
Oh, God, sorry.
NAMBLA is kitty diddlers.
Oh, I know.
Marlon Brando appreciation thing.
What is NIMBA? Does anybody
It's
know what the fuck
probably an
NIMBA is?
act.
Wait, isn't NIMBA the lion from Lion King?
I have less of a problem with the stopping of the
Simba.
refineries and more of a problem in the fact that the environmental lobby seems to have a giant hate motor for nuclear power, because that would take a lot of like stress off of our need for oil.
That's true.
That would
actually.
But radiation, that's bad. Like drugs,
Oh,
no bad.
it's statistically insignificant, and it's not nearly as bad as people.
Oh, I know. I did chemistry. It's
Oh, okay,
ridiculous.
good. Yeah, all
Here's
right.
the
then
thing.
you know.
Here's the thing with nuclear power plants. Nuclear power plants are fine as long as the person that builds them is competent. And it's kind of frightening that all the stuff that gets built by our government gets built by the lowest bidder. That's what's terrifying about nuclear power.
Okay, that's a concern.
Yeah.
Yeah, true story.
Yeah.
So the wall on the southern border, is it going to happen? Is it going to happen anytime soon? Like, is it going to happen during his first whatever?
No.
And are we going to take it up the ass?
At the rate it's going, and him trying to force Mexico to pay for it, and Nieto going, no, we're not going to pay for it. The only way it's going to happen is if we find a way to pay for it, and then, slowly through, negotiations, try and get the money back later. But I don't think it's going to happen.
That's not going to happen either.
Here's the way to make them pay for it.
What?
Stop paying them. Stop sending our money across.
That's what I said.
Until the wall's built, and then afterwards and everything, they can renegotiate with us about trading with us.
Yeah, that was my suggestion a few days ago. I said if Mexico doesn't want to pay for the wall, stop giving them everything. No trade. They'll pay for the wall pretty damn quick. So let's, but I mean, that's never going to happen, of course. No. The political backlash on that would be swift and severe, which is so stupid. But so let's assume that the wall doesn't get built. Worst case scenario, we still have a porous border. Is terrorism something that should register on the minds of Americans in their day-to-day lives?
Also, can I interject? You gonna build a wall? You gonna build a wall with Canada too?
Well, no, they're white.
Well, but I mean that's where a lot of the terrorists are coming in from, because it's way easier.
Oh yeah, because the fucking Trudeau's open borders shit.
Not just that, but I mean it's just an easier, like a more hospitable. Weirdly enough, it's actually more hospitable to cross from Canada than it is from Mexico. Like just on foot.
Interesting. Is that a concern?
We should always be on guard because we still have terrorist actions happening in the United States. The only problem is we did have them, and we still do to a small degree. But we know when we had them under Obama, they were workplace incidents.
Right, exactly.
Because I mean, if somebody yells "Allah Akbar" and starts chopping heads off, that's not a workplace incident. That is an isolated terroristic incident, and it needed to be called for what it was.
Indeed, we are fortunate in America. I mean, I don't live in America, but you guys are fortunate in America. With the exception of 9/11. It is a true statement that there hasn't been a lot of fatalities in America thanks to Islamic terror, and because we're oceans away from their production sites where they pump out their terrorists. We're very fortunate in that regard. However, as shit heats up and Islam spreads across the world, is it realistic? Is terrorism something that should legitimately be on the minds of everyday Americans? TJ Kirk made he's an idiot. I fucking hate the guy. But he made a good point that your likelihood of dying in a terrorist attack is statistically insignificant. So as Americans, should we be even considering it at home? Realistically. Or is it fear-mongering to do so?
Well, the last time we thought we were too big to be touched, 9/11 happened.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that something of that magnitude could ever happen again?
If we lax our vigilance, yes. I mean, let's face it. 9/11 would not have happened if we didn't get so big for our britches, if we didn't have such a big ego in this country that we thought we were untouchable. And we can't get back to that mentality again. We have to be cautious. We have to hope for the best and plan for the worst, as the old adage goes. We can't just assume that since everything is building up and we're turning things around, that, we can stop everything that comes our way. Because inevitably, the bigger you are, the quicker you fall when something blindsides you.
Most college students were 4 to 6 years old when 9/11 happened. I believe we're seeing this generation forgetting 9/11.
I was 15.
Yeah, I was 20-something. I'm ancient. Maddie, do you disagree with that statement? Because you
Sorry?
just said that, Maddie, you just said that we can't forget the lessons learned basically from 9/11. Would you say that this generation, these millennial leftist Antifa shitbags, represent what happens when you forget 9/11? When you think multiculturalism is a good idea?
Yes, I believe they are forgetting, and I believe that if they continue forgetting or they continue denying it ever happened, that it's a really good chance that it will happen again. And they have grown up with this air of entitlement, with this air of we can do no wrong, but we deserve everything for doing nothing, that if any of them get in office, that mentality is going to go into our government, and we're going to be seeing, the same mentality we're seeing in the European Union. We have to let them in. We have to embrace them. And that mess is going to come here.
It's
Omegon, is 9/11? Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Let me check that. Okay, we have 12 minutes. Is 9/11 a topic of discussion at all in England, Great Britain, or wherever?
We've had a few terror attacks that are remembered. One that happened, was it mid-July? And we talk about that still quite a lot. Obviously, it's not on par with yours, certainly not. And I remember that because I remember going into school, going into chemistry class, and was happening, and I thought it was a joke. I thought someone was like, "That's a shit prank." But we do talk about things like that, and the thing about the Antifa, the tolerant people, it's not that they just want us to forget it ever happened. They want to erase it so far as to, for example, the statues that they have defiled or in their crocs stomped on, which has done fuck all to them. These people, they're entitled, but they also believe everything is what they deem to be a human right, and that is in itself an entitlement, which is rather irritating. But we do talk about 9/11 because we talk about it. Obviously, is one of those things that's not going to be forgotten. People want to forget things like that, and we have had instances where things have happened in our country. For example, and this is something I'm doing a video on, child grooming did quite badly in our country for about 20 years by predominantly Pakistani men within communities in a town called Rotherham. And we still talk about it because people refuse to do anything about because they were afraid of being called racist or Islamophobic.
I read about that.
But we still talk. Now, it goes a bit further because there was a politician called Naz Shah, and she is a Muslim politician. She said she liked a tweet that said, and I'll just get the tweet because it's in my, I believe I still have the folder. Where is it? The tweet read, and she liked and retweeted this. Those abused girls in Rotherham and elsewhere just need to shut their mouths for the good of diversity.
What?
Should you ever be silent on something so inherently bad, something so heinous? And I'm not comparing this to 9/11, but that kind of, you shouldn't forget this.
That's a different kind of heinous, though.
Oh, right. It's very similar to the 9/11. We brought it on ourselves bullshit.
Yeah.
9/11's like Flash, and that's like a
trying to get
mold
to. I
growing in the
couldn't segue to it.
Sorry, go ahead. That made me mad.
No. I couldn't think how to get onto that point. It was quite. I get lost in my head.
It's
sometimes.
cool. It's like mold growing in the darkness more than like Flash.
No, it's great. I completely understand what you're saying. It's a blind eye is being turned, and it's incredibly frustrating.
Kind of blind eye to me.
Oh, I wanted to say, I actually, in chat, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that Broken-Hearted Liberal kind of raked me over the coals regarding my comment on car crashes. I think it's a she, said, so fucking what? Car crashes aren't intentional. Terrorism is intentional. And that was my point. I tweeted back to Atheism is Unstoppable exactly what you said, that the distinction is that terrorism is preventable and it's intentional. However, I was just looking at it from a statistical standpoint. I live in Cambodia. I don't fear terrorism here at all. I go to the markets with, a song in my heart and a smile on my face because I have no okay, sorry. Well, it's fucking liberal, you read liberal, you assume female. Anyway.
I was going to say liberal's a guy. I've talked to him before.
Yeah. I don't fear terrorism because it's statistically insignificant, even though it's intentional and targeted at me. So that was my greater point. But anyway, I don't want to backpedal too far. I actually creeping towards the end. Oh, we got 7 minutes. I'm sorry. So anyway, I feel like Thorne, I cut you off. Yes.
It's okay.
Okay. So anyway, the topic of this discussion was the anatomy of terrorism, primarily because terrorism, even though, I'm saying I don't fear it, I'm greatly concerned because I'm seeing it rising up with Antifa not being smacked down, with the Rotherham grooming gangs, plus Cologne, the police not wanting to release statistical data on the perpetrators. It just seems to me that we're progressing down a path where terrorism will become ho-hum. And in England, again, to Omegon, to go back to you, in England, you guys have had a rash of terrorism recently.
And we talk about it in Parliament all the time, in Prime Minister's questions, and it's become a regular occurrence. The Prime Minister will stand up and say, and I think the whole House would like to send condolences to, and then they'll name the town, and then they'll say, we need to do more to combat terrorism in whatever form it takes. And I'm like, well, clearly you're not, because, and this is a common theme, David Cameron was the worst one for this. Islam is the religion of peace. All these terror attacks committed by Muslims, we mustn't think of it this way because white people do this as well. Okay.
Yeah, false equivalency. Well, to be fair, Islam is indeed the religion of peace. Peace of you there, peace of you there.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, no, it'll be the religion of peace because there's nobody alive to oppose you. That would be very peaceful.
There is.
Once everyone was all Muslim, it would be.
Well, there is something else to add to that. There was the oh god, I can't remember which country it is. It might be Germany. Yeah, people have been told to not speak out if they've been harmed by or beaten up, assaulted by a quote refugee. That kind of guilting people into silence kind of mentality. Actually,
I read that.
Sources.
The onus for that, or the justification, was because it will create negative sentiment against other refugees who need, our care and love.
Even though such a large number of those quote refugees are actually not refugees at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're economic migrants in most cases. And what's crazy is you do have statistics in Germany that you can look at. They're not as thorough as American in terms of demographic tracking, etc. But Kraut and T does a great job of this, going over the statistics in Germany. And yeah, this idea of these peaceful refugees is just, it's farcical. It's laughably bad. And it would be funny if it wasn't so tragic that so many people are being victimized.
I'm actually very worried because of where I live.
And also, too, what a lot of people don't want to believe is it's not only the active and violent terrorist acts, it's also seeping in on the psychological level with, you know, the lies. You know, especially Linda Sarsour with her, well, if you finally wake up one morning and you don't have any interest on your loans or credit cards, that's Sharia.
And shut the fuck up. She
Exactly.
actually shut the fuck up.
It's lying to get people on your side in Islam. Because if you can convince the people of the quote-unquote beautiful lies, you can actually extend your tendrils to other places.
That's Takia.
Yep.
You're allowed to lie.
Mm-hmm.
They're encouraged to.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm actually very worried.
You can lie to me all
And
day
it was
long.
the
I'm still not going to pray to your fake God.
What was that? What was that, Omegon?
Oh, I'm just not going to pray to a fake God. Die. I just don't care.
No. Fake God as in there's a real God or any God?
There's only one God. His name's Cthulhu.
There we go. Okay. So we've got 3 minutes left.
I just want to say, like, living in Chicago, I'm actually very worried about terrorism.
Why? What's specifically about Chicago?
Well, not only because it's a large city and I work in the most populated area of it, but also that this is kind of what's happening in Europe has kind of begun here, in that there was recently a case of an Uber driver that instead of he like canceled the chick's fare, or it got canceled somehow, and he's like, well, instead of like taking money from you or just having her get out of the car, I want to have sex with you. And she said no, and ended up having to jump out of a moving vehicle to get away from him.
Wow.
That is very disturbing. That's terrible. Criminal, isn't it?
It is, and the and CPD so far, they have his name and everything, but as far, he hasn't been arrested or anything like that. And the comments were basically, well, I don't know why she had such a problem with this. Muslims are peaceful.
Oh, that's terrible. That is actually terrible.
Never read the
that's
comments.
actually-
The comments are fucking cancer.
It's prescribed in Islam. It says that women have to, that's why the women have to wear beekeeper suits, is because men are incapable of controlling themselves. And by saying that, it means when I rape a woman, it's not my fault.
Pretty much.
It's a get out of jail. It's a get out of jail free card for men. That's all Islam was built
It's
around.
not a beekeeper suit. It's a sentient bin liner.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sentient trash bags.
Exactly.
Yes.
And why black polyester in the fucking desert? Like that's not about fashion. That's about torture.
I think it's cotton.
That is torture. That is the epitome of torture. That's just all the heat's being taken in. That person is cooking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why black? And they're nasty. They'll just poop. I've seen it. I've seen it on the internet. Had to have been
Ew.
true. No, for real. Look it up. Old Muslim lady, shits in the street or something. It's crazy, and people catch her doing it. But anyway. All right, so what I'd like to do is start with Maddie. Can you tell people where to find you? Let's go ahead and wrap up. It is 1 minute till.
Yep, my channel is Mad Woman Muses. I also have a website that's linked to my channel, and a blog. Because when I'm not doing the live streams, I am either uploading content or doing blog posts. I do a new show Monday through Friday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, because I'm trying to stay in that particular habit so 5 people don't ask me what time zone. I also shit post on Twitter.
And what's your Twitter handle? Did you say that?
At a Mad Woman Muses.
Gotcha. Thorne, can we make sure that we get all those links and shit in the description? I'm sure you've already done it because you're very thorough, but I always forget.
I will make
Okay.
sure that I did it. Sometimes I forget, but I will make sure.
Awesome. Omegon, go ahead. Same. Sorry, that's what they say in Asia. Same.
And I'm very late, so yeah.
No, where can people find you? You got Twitter, you got a YouTube.
I have a Twitter at Omegon, I believe. Oh, did I change it? No, it's still at Omegon. Yeah.
Well, we will definitely have you back. We'll have you back on another show, probably on a different topic later down the road.
I'll very quickly explain what happened. So, without knowing, my father, called, and my sisters and I went to taste for a barbecue. It turns out it's very close to 1 year since my mum passed, and we sort of got together as a meetup. I forgot about this, so I'm very sorry for not turning up on time.
No, it's okay. It's completely okay. Family, family's important.
If you were willing to have me on next week, I have nothing planned.
Sure.
I'm more than willing to.
We don't know. We've got no topic yet. We're going to talk about it, but yeah, we'll hold a spot for you for sure.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
So I'm Logical Lion. I actually figured I should probably tell you on Twitter it's XX Logical Lion XX because some fucking cunt took all iterations of Logical Lion except for like XX Logical. So I'm a 90s fucking hipster with XX. Yeah, I'm edgy, bro.
You
anyway,
vape as well?
What's that?
Do you vape as well, douche?
Yes, I actually do vape. I am a legendary pothead. Anyway, I'm traveling the world. I retired 3 years ago, and so now I'm just haunting Twitter and making YouTube videos sporadically. I'm moving in 5 days, and so I haven't really been doing much on my YouTube channel. But in a week's time, my channel is going to explode because I've got probably about 12 videos I've been working on that are just a piece here, a piece there from being done. And then we'll throw everything on VidMe because that's where I see the future is. So anyway, check me out on Twitter.
Yeah.
Subscribe. This is our weekly show, Thorn and I do. This is her channel. Thorn, do your thing because, they're on your channel.
Okay. So, well, you're already on my channel, but you can follow me at Lady of Miserable. That's Lady with an I and of with a 0. I actually have a video cooking right now. It's about BLM and why I'm pissed off at them. So, watch for that on YouTube for about 2 days, and then I'm going to take it down, put up a trailer, and throw it up on VidMe. Because, I'm just going to use YouTube for trailers.
Yeah, VidMe, I think, is going to be the future of at least the near future. What YouTube?
My regular videos there a day before I do to YouTube, and it is growing very quickly.
All it's going to take is a couple of giants, millions of subscribers to hop over and game over YouTube. I wanted to say that later on in the week, I'm hoping to steal Thorn. I'm going to be doing a discussion/debate on the morality of veganism with Amanda Wolfchild.
Great. Moral objectivism's coming up.
Moral
objectivity. Yay.
I'm a vegan, so I will be representing the vegan side of things. Although I'm not a weirdo vegan, so it should be an interesting conversation with her. She's a lot of fun, and I'm hoping that Thorn will moderate for me. But that'll be later in the week. I'll be advertising all over Twitter, so look for me on Twitter and come watch that. I think it'll be fun.
I'm going to stop the broadcast.
Go ahead.
But yes. Bye, guys.